I believe it's officially day 9 of the quarantine, and it's been an interesting progression. I feel like the news came out and it was kind of a big deal, but not really. And then a couple days went on, at least here in Northern California, and it seemed like nothing happened. So it was kind of like, oh, well, it's fine, nothing's really happening. And then all of a sudden, when the stay-at-home order was in place, it was like, oh, maybe this is really, really bad, even though we're not experiencing it directly here. And so, aside from all of the science and the politics, I'm more interested in the emotional side of this pandemic. And so my first question is, okay, coronavirus, it's here, we know it's here, but how do we really know how bad it is? Like, how do we really know how safe we need to be? And how do we know what the right thing to do is? Because, like I said, it just doesn't seem like it's that bad here, but I know that it is.
To answer your question, scientifically and ironically, we don't. That doesn't sound well coming from a scientific perspective. Scientifically, we don't, and that's ironic. We should know more about it, but we don't. Intuitively, we do know more about it, and we have to rely now on intuition because this coronavirus has an incubation period that is extended really long. And as a result, we need to pay more attention to that.
Well, when you say intuitively, I understand that. Our health issues should be intuitive. We should be more in tune with what's going on, but it's very hard to do that when you're afraid of it. Like, I know I'm having really bad allergies right now, and every time I have a little tickle in my throat, I'm like, coronavirus? And I know that it's not. I know that it's allergies, and I have enough health intuition to know the difference, but at the same time, because of all this fear and information, it's hard not to jump there.
Of course, and it isn't just an occasional person jumping there. Now it's everybody jumping there and saying, wow, my knee hurts, maybe I've got cancer kind of thing. Wow, my head aches, I've got a tumor. Wow, I'm a little hot, I must have the coronavirus. So it's not different than we usually experience, except that it's pervasive now. And that pervasiveness leaves us with a lot of anxiety. I look at things from a macro perspective rather than from a micro perspective. The details are things that have never really interested me that much, so information comes to me in larger packets. And so for me, intuitively, this virus is so insidious that in 4 weeks from now, as far as I'm concerned, 3-4 weeks, it will be everywhere. And people will then realize what's happening. So most people don't know that. What I just said is something that might scare a lot of people. It's also something that people should pay attention to and use it to construct or continue to construct their lives according to now at this time.
What does that mean?
It means that instead of letting oneself become infected with fear, another infection, taking action against that fear, action that they can take when they can't take action against the virus, but they can take action against that fear and do the kinds of things necessary to keep it at bay. You see, people make excuses and exceptions for themselves. As one scientist who's a friend of mine, a personal friend of mine in New York said, it's the anxiety that's causing most of the problem. It's going to get worse, but the anxiety is pervasive. And it's going to become more pervasive as time goes on, as we see more cases. So doing something about it means doing the things that we usually do at a distance. I don't like the term social distancing. I think we should rather call it personal distancing, because what's happening now is people who are distancing themselves from the social contacts are not distancing themselves from individual and personal contacts. And that is where the virus is making its headway, because people do not know that they're infected, and they do not feel it. And many people are not presenting symptoms, but their friend, their companion, their parent, their schoolmate will react very strongly, and nobody knows that it's going to happen. So distancing, personal distancing, is really important, and following that rule, it's more important than washing hands now, is keeping that distance at least 6 feet and using a mask, even if you're going to be within 6 feet, using a mask.
Okay, so back to this anxiety piece. As much work as I, for example, have done on anxiety through the things that you've taught me, like meditation and facing the anxiety prompts head on in like a mindfulness meditation type of thing, this is still pretty bad. This is still causing me a good amount of anxiety, even though we have prepared for it. And so I know it's that we practice all the time for big events like this, but I don't think that in all of that practice I ever considered that something like this would actually happen. And so now that it is, it's really hard not to be worried about it. And I think that's because there are so many things to worry about. Like, I think that the least of my concerns is about me getting sick, but it's about people around me getting sick, or bigger social destruction type things. So how do you combat that?
In order to address that kind of idea and the anxiety that we're talking about, in fact, that I just mentioned, it's important to take charge of this whole situation, take charge of the virus, and take charge of the things that the virus is presenting. There's a woman in Missouri who has a son who's in the hospital. She's a nurse, but she's had to travel to the children's hospital because he's a child, and it's many, many hours away. And so she went with him for his chemotherapy. While she's there, as instructed, she's contributing as a nurse. She's gotten into the health system, and she's contributing to those who have the coronavirus. So she's doing her thing that she knows how to do, in spite of the fact that her son may be dying of a very severe form of cancer. So let me harken back again to my original statement. We really need to take charge of this. And sitting back in our safe places and not doing anything, just hiding out, isn't the best thing to do. That's why I recommend that people study themselves, they read, they meditate, and even I've been suggesting people to go volunteer, find a place to volunteer or do something. Protect yourself, but be proactive about this, as you would with any other problem that came up in your life. You'd take the challenge and you'd take it on.
Well, I think that's the thing. It's like, okay, does obstacle or opportunity apply to really big things like this? Yes, of course it does, but what if you just don't feel like it? Like you say, tackle this head on, take it on. What if there's just no motivation because it all seems so meaningless? It's like, if it's going to all end anyway, then it's just hard to find a reason to be proactive about it. Like, this is not fun, you know? How do you I guess, conjure up the energy to feel like doing anything.
That is a perspective. What you just offered is a perspective. And it might be a valid perspective to say, I'm just not going to do anything. I'm just going to sit and let it take advantage of me as it does. But it is a perspective. The question is it a satisfying perspective?
No, and that's not really what I was saying. I was saying that, just before the coronavirus pandemic, it was hard to deal with the suffering that goes on in the world and tackling the issue of meaninglessness. But now that things seem so awful, that just seems a lot more prominent in my way of thinking. And I'm sure a lot of other young people too.
But I'm suggesting you think more broadly, and other young people think more broadly about this. Before the coronavirus, there was and is a virus in this world, and it's a psychopolitical virus, and it is infecting the entire world. There is a climate virus. There's a biological, evolutionary virus, so to speak. Things are changing rapidly. We know that climate change is taking its toll increasingly on the planet. This particular virus is not different than climate change. What we learned from climatologists was that weather would become and climate would become more crazy. Climate would become more extreme. There would be extremes of heat and cold. And we knew that was coming on, and we were counting on the fact that we counted on the idea that it would slow down, that it would be slow, that it would take years, maybe even decades. But just like the ice shelves melting in Antarctica are a wild card, they could raise the ocean meters. So this is another wild card that is more of a biological wild card that is threatening a more rapid change in our condition here on planet Earth. That's the kind of thing we want to take on. Just like in Yellowstone National Park is a supervolcano that could blow at any time. Do you know what geologists are doing? They can't wait to get on the ground in Yellowstone and study it. In other words, they're making that volcano and the very fact that they could die in their research meaningful. They're bringing meaning to it. That's another way of looking at it. So everything is accelerating. There's a funneling down now of everything from biology to climate. And philosophically, we're aware of that's happening. And that's why philosophers should be the ones teaching us now. Philosophers should be the ones doing exactly what you're doing, questioning this kind of thing and trying to find some way to bring more meaning. Now, I've said that, and maybe this will be published. But even if it is, most people would not heed or even listen to what I'm saying. It's only a few ears. It's in the Bible where Jesus said to some of his disciples and those who were listening to him, "For those who have ears, let them hear." And what he was meaning was that many people would be listening, but they would not really hear what he was saying. Isn't that exactly what's happening with climate, sustainability, pollution, and now biology? I don't remember his name, I should remember his name, but there is a famous Nobel laureate prize winner. He's a PhD scientist who said, it is not war that will cause the demise of Homo sapiens, but a virus. That prediction was made some time ago when he received a Nobel Prize.
Do you think this is the end? Do you think this is that virus?
This is part of the end, yes. This is part of the demise. My global intuition, take it for what it's worth, this is part of the ending times. correct. And
well, I mean, I don't think that life will go back to any sort of the way it was after this. I just can't imagine that. So no matter what, it's going to be a new way of life.
but it's a seesaw. It's an ebb and a flow, just like the ocean. There's a big fire. It burns so many things and destroys so many things, but then there's an ebb and there's a lot of rain. It puts the fire out. So there's a tendency in this negative insustainability direction. Things get a little better, then they get way worse. Things get a little better, then they get way worse. So it's the downhill trend of entropy. Entropy is taking more of a toll now.
Well, I think that aside from all the doom and gloom type stuff I just asked you about, I think that big situations like this are when we're called the most to act on what we've been practicing and what we've learned and actually exercise our virtues. But it just feels so hard sometimes.
Because this is in the back of your mind no matter what you're doing. If you look at the desiderata, I say look at the desiderata and take that as your formula for all of you while this is happening. Go placidly amidst the noise and haste. Remember what peace there may be in silence. You see, when you meditate on that and when you take that with you, your day is a little better. As far as possible, without compromise, be on good terms with all people. That's another sutra from the Desiderata. That can be taken with when you go to the store and you find someone who's struggling to get their things in their cart and they drop their money when they're wearing a mask. Am I going to help them pick up their money when they're wearing a mask? Well, see, I am. Now, I will immediately think, oh, then I'm going to go wash my hands. But I'm going to dive in and help that person. Many people will not because they're not there. But I'm saying, I think that those who are wanting to grow in this and wanting to understand this, we need to take that kind of action. We're going to see more of that happening. Souls who were dormant and were not doing much of anything will wake up and perform better in this environment as time goes on, as people die, as the population changes. But there's an acceleration here, and this virus is threatening to jump ahead. It's clever. It's very clever. It's insidious. It's silent. It's patient. We can look at this as a character, this little virus. It doesn't even have a life. It has no DNA, and yet it can do all this damage. This is a bit humbling for human beings in all their hubris. So I say again, study the virus, study yourself. That's what I'm recommending people do. Offer yourself as a volunteer, as this woman in Missouri did. She's behind a mask, helping people who have the coronavirus as it spreads. I think of when you talk to me at another time about Peace Corps. There's the Peace Corps. There's Greenpeace. There's Doctors Without Borders. There's missionaries. There are people all over, in spite of whatever horror is going on, they're contributing. And they find that meaningful. Some of them are religious people. Some of them are atheists. But they find meaning in doing these good things. And that's what I say is, do something that is meaningful, contribute. In fact, that's what's happening right now. You, with your education and your interest, you have the capacity to tap into someone like me and get questions answered from a particular perspective. And you continue to do that. So you bring information to people, and that's good. That's like bringing water. It's like bringing food. It's like bringing some consolation. People need this. This is what they want. And so this will be published, and people will consume it, or they won't. But that does not matter to me or to you. They will consume it or they won't. We're doing the right thing, and it's satisfying.
That is true. So I guess my final question is, what level of worry is a good level of worry? Like, how worried should we be without feeling overwhelmed? How cautious should we be without being paranoid?
By now, people who are staying home and obeying the quarantine will not every moment be thinking about this, but it will cross their minds. Oh, I've got to go get some food. Oh, I've got to go get some gasoline. Oh, I've got to pick up my daughter. So when those promptings for events in their life, necessary events in their life, come to mind, they will immediately jump to, how am I going to do that? What protections and what cautions am I going to install? Today, I went out to top off my gas tank in case of emergency, and someone needed me. I went to the gas store. But I thought about it before I went. I didn't think, oh, I need gas, I need gas. When it occurred to me, oh, I could get some gas. Oh, what am I going to do then? Well, I have prepared for emergencies long ago, and I have rubber gloves or latex gloves. So I took some gloves and I went to the gas station, and I waited till no one was in the store, and I went in and gave my $20, held my breath the whole time because I can do that, walked out of the store, breathed again, went and filled my gas tank with gasoline using rubber gloves, and then threw the rubber gloves, the latex gloves, and then threw the latex gloves in the trash, got in my car, and went home. That's protocol now. That's the new normal for now, and maybe for a long time. Also, last night, I went to see a movie, I saw some of it, called Outbreak, to study what we already know about this kind of virus. And it's a good movie to see for me, and maybe many others, because it is people taking charge of a similar virus and being very pleased with taking charge and being very happy with taking charge of doing something when everybody else is panicking.
Yeah, with my level of worry, I don't think that's a movie I'm gonna watch.
So, here's another thing. You feel at risk maybe because you have some biological or physical infirmity that would cause a lot of trouble if you got the virus as a secondary thing. For example, someone with heart weakness, the virus is going to cause a lot of trouble for that person. But what you can do is stay home and do these kinds of things. You can write about this kind of thing. You can prepare a document about your own response to the coronavirus and response to the international reactions to the virus, and use them at another time once this passes. Use them for the next crisis that comes along. So there's plenty of good stuff to be able to do. And then for me and students, my students like you and other students who I've been talking to this way, use this time as a retreat. This is a long, extended retreat. Think of it that way. Now it's an opportunity. Think of it as a time to practice some abstinence from certain kinds of foods, or some fasting, some other kinds of discipline. Use it as a time to dig into some literature that you wouldn't ordinarily dig into. Use it as a time to learn a skill. Let's say chess.
Or needlepoint.
Or needlepoint that you that you would like to do and you have not done. So there are plenty things to do if you get creative. If you're not creative, for those who are not creative, you can go online and ask for things to do.
Great advice. DuckDuckGo really coming in for us.
That's right. Go to DuckDuckGo and ask for some ideas. Those ideas that they give you will prompt ideas of your own in areas that are fun for you. I've made a whole list of things that I like to do and can do quite alone when I take my breaks.
That's lovely.